The human brain consumes roughly 20% of your body's total metabolic energy. You might expect that number to peak when you are solving complex calculus, and to plummet when you sit motionless in a pitch-black room. But neuroimaging reveals a thermodynamic paradox. The energy drain remains completely identical in both states. Biological rest for the human brain is a complete illusion. It never powers down. When you stop actively engaging with the world, the brain simply switches its operating algorithm. Looking at this 3D cybernetic model, we can map out how the brain handles reality. The intraparietal sulcus and the frontal eye fields form a hardware array that neuroscientists call the task-positive network. This network fires at maximum capacity when you are heavily focused on an external task, like tracking and catching a baseball. But the millisecond your attention drifts from the outside world, this specific outer network powers down. Since the overall 20% energy consumption never drops, moments of physical rest actually represent a massive transfer of metabolic power. The compute power shifts away from your immediate environment, diverting straight into a highly demanding, unseen background process. Neuroscientists call this hidden background algorithm the default mode network. While the task-positive network maps to the outer cortex, the default mode network is anchored deep within, relying on the medial, prefrontal, and parietal cortices. The boot-up is instantaneous. The moment your external tasks cease, these deep magenta nodes rapidly interconnect and fire. These two processors operate under a strict structural rule. They are intensely anti-correlated. Finite metabolic limits physically prevent both networks from running simultaneously. The brain must continuously toggle between the cyan external processor and the magenta internal one. This creates a continuous mechanical tug-of-war. If your external focus slips for a fraction of a second, the default mode network aggressively reclaims the processing power. So-called daydreaming is not a gentle, passive state of rest. It is a high-power computational algorithm actively fighting your immediate surroundings for metabolic resources. This brings us back to the thermodynamic paradox. If running this deep internal network requires the exact same massive energy load as intense mathematical calculus, what exactly is it calculating? To justify monopolizing a fifth of your body's total energy supply, the default mode network has to be executing an incredibly heavy computation. It is performing a task vital enough to warrant that continuous metabolic burn. The conscious output of this massive energy drain is what researchers classify as task-unrelated, stimulus-independent thought. We generally call it mind-wandering. Long before modern fMRI scans could measure cerebral blood flow, early psychologists like William James recognized this relentless, spontaneous generation of internal thought, coining the term stream of consciousness. To execute this stream of consciousness, the hardware must perform a specific protocol known as the decoupling hypothesis. Because of the anti-correlated rule, the brain cannot fully process reality while simulating thoughts. It must physically sever or dull its sensory processing of the external environment, actively dimming the incoming flow of visual and auditory data. You experience this protocol whenever you drive a highly familiar route and suddenly realize you have absolutely no memory of the last 5 miles. Spacing out behind the wheel is not a glitch of your attention span. It is an active hardware decoupling. Your brain deprioritized the predictable road to free up compute power for the internal simulator. That internal simulator is the default mode network's primary evolutionary function. It operates as a highly advanced virtual machine. To build its internal environments, the network relies on raw materials pulled from your past. It retrieves microscopic data packets of archived episodic memory from the parietal and temporal zones, feeding them directly into the prefrontal cortex. The prefrontal cortex compiles these memory fragments to construct highly complex physics and social simulations. It renders interactive models of events that have not actually happened yet. Researchers define this tendency as perspective bias. Given the choice, the human brain expends significantly more of its idle energy simulating future scenarios than it does reviewing past ones. What we experience emotionally as a guilty fear of failure or general anxiety is mechanically just the network's threat detection engine running repetitive predictive algorithms. The simulator continuously maps out complex social dynamics. It processes thousands of variables to calculate optimal responses for hypothetical conversations you might have tomorrow. From a hardware perspective, this is a purely mechanical process. The brain is running a sterile social engine to solve an optimization problem, entirely devoid of metaphysical emotion. Rendering these rich, detailed hypothetical environments requires massive amounts of data storage, pushing the brain's working memory capacity to its absolute limit. The default mode network operates as a biological time machine. It consumes that massive metabolic baseline to allow humans to adapt to the future long before it occurs. Running an advanced physics and social engine presents a structural problem. The simulation requires a central actor to navigate the environment. The hardware solves this by generating a central computational avatar. This persistent first-person character is what we experience as the self, or the ego. The continuous mirror of your identity, your distinct personality traits, your name, your specific regrets, is an active construct. It is maintained entirely by the neural correlates within the default mode network. The ego is a highly energy-intensive projection generated inside your working memory. It only exists because the brain constantly supplies it with metabolic fuel. Because your entire sense of identity relies on this network having the idle power to run, the self is computationally fragile. Under the right hardware conditions, it can actually be deleted. The ultimate hardware stress test for this avatar is a moment of extreme external demand, commonly known as the flow state. Biologically, the flow state is a condition of perfect, unwavering focus. You engage with an external task so intensely that the task-positive network is pushed to its absolute maximum capacity. This intense external demand triggers the anti-correlated rule. To survive the immediate environment, the hardware must completely override the internal network. The resulting computational cascade is instantaneous. Stripped of the magenta network's processing power, the brain's internal simulator crashes. Starved of metabolic energy, the central avatar collapses. The ego is physically deleted from the brain's working memory. Athletes and musicians frequently report this exact subjective outcome during flow. They describe a complete and total loss of the internal monologue, a state entirely free of self-consciousness. Being in the zone is a sheer hardware limitation. The human brain simply lacks the metabolic energy to compute complex external reality and the concept of identity simultaneously. You are a background process, and at the absolute peak of human focus, the concept of I physically vanishes from the hardware.